The Galactic Council Chamber, an awe-inspiring hall built from translucent crystal and glowing energy conduits, buzzed with disbelief and ridicule. Representatives from dozens of species, each more alien and advanced than the last, had gathered to discuss a matter of great importance, the inheritance of King Valeth's empire. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display projected the late king's final will. His voice, deep and steady, echoed through the hall as his last wishes were read aloud. To my trusted friend, Commander Elias Voss of Terra, I leave my throne, my wealth, and my empire. The moment the words were spoken, the room erupted into laughter, gasps, and outraged murmurs. The Galactic Council, a group of beings who prided themselves on their wisdom and sophistication, found the idea utterly absurd. A human, scoffed Representative Zornak of the Vlaxian hive, his multiple eyes narrowing in disdain. A primitive species that only recently learned how to leave their own solar system. Preposterous. King Valeth must have been senile in his final days, sneered Lady Shalara of the Seraphim Ascendancy, her shimmering wings fluttering with annoyance. To entrust his empire to a creature so unrefined. The laughter grew louder as more voices joined in, each piling on their contempt for the humans. It wasn't just Elias Voss who was mocked. It was all of humanity. To the council, humans were an upstart species, barely worth noticing in a galaxy ruled by civilizations that had existed for millennia. Sitting silently in her designated seat, Princess Arela, King Valeth's only daughter, clenched her fists. Her silver eyes glimmered with frustration, though she kept her expression neutral. Arela was known for her intelligence and grace, but the humiliation of being passed over for a human was almost too much to bear. This is an insult to my father's legacy, she thought bitterly. I was trained for this, I was born for this, and yet he chose him. Meanwhile, far away from the grandeur of the Galactic Council, Commander Elias Voss stood on the observation deck of a Terran starship. The message from the Council had arrived just hours ago, informing him of his sudden and unexpected inheritance. He stared out at the stars, his mind racing. Elias was not a man who sought fame or power. He had joined the Terran fleet to explore the galaxy and protect his people, not to rule an empire. Yet here he was, chosen by one of the most influential rulers in galactic history to take his place. Why me? Elias murmured, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Amina Rahal, approached cautiously. Sir, the Council's message has been decoded. They're meeting now to discuss the will. From what I've heard, they're not pleased. Elias chuckled dryly, though there was no humor in it. I can imagine. We're not exactly their favorite species. They think we're inferior, Amina said, her voice sharp with defiance. But maybe that's why King Valeth chose you. He saw something they can't. Elias turned to face her, or maybe he made a mistake. Amina shook her head. I don't believe that. And I don't think you do either. Whatever the reason, he trusted you with this responsibility. That has to mean something. Back in the council chamber, the debate raged on. Some representatives argued for overturning the will, claiming it was invalid. Others, though fewer in number, suggested giving the human a chance, if only to maintain the sanctity of galactic law. Enough, boomed High Chancellor Xoreth, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. The towering reptilian figure stood from his seat, his crimson scales glinting under the light. The will of King Valeth is clear. Whether we agree with it or not, galactic law requires us to honor his decision. The room fell silent, though the tension was palpable. Princess Arela rose gracefully, her silver gown flowing like liquid light. Chancellor, she said, her voice calm but firm, I request permission to address the council. Xoreth nodded. Granted. Arela stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. My father was a wise and noble ruler, she began, but even the wisest of us are not immune to error. This decision, This choice of a human as his heir cannot be what he truly intended. I propose we test this Commander Voss. Let him prove himself worthy of the throne. If he fails, the council should declare the will null and void. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The idea of a test appealed to many. It would give them an opportunity to humiliate the humans further while maintaining a veneer of fairness. Soreth considered her words, then nodded. Very well. Commander Elias Voss shall be summoned to face the council. Let him prove his worth, or fail trying. As the decision was made, a summons was sent to Elias aboard his starship. Unaware of the storm awaiting him, he prepared to embark on a journey that would change not only his life, but the fate of humanity itself. Elias Voss stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, a lone human amidst a sea of towering alien figures. The room buzzed with whispers, the air heavy with disdain and skepticism. Every pair of eyes, from the multifaceted gaze of the Vlaxians to the glowing orbs of the Luminar elders, seemed to pierce through him. For a moment, Elias felt small. The chamber was a monument to civilizations far older and more advanced than humanity. Its walls shimmered with holographic patterns that shifted like living constellations, and its domed ceiling displayed a swirling view of the galaxy, a reminder of how insignificant Earth appeared in the grand scheme of things. Commander Elias Voss of Terra, High Chancellor Soreth began, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. The crimson-scaled leader loomed over Elias, his reptilian eyes filled with scrutiny. You stand before the council as the named heir of King Valeth's empire. Do you understand the gravity of this situation? Elias nodded, his back straight despite the weight of the gazes around him. I do, Chancellor. A scoff echoed from the far side of the chamber. Representative Zornak of the Vlaxian hive leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in irritation. Do you truly? Your species is barely crawling out of its own star system, and now you expect us to believe you are capable of ruling one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Laughter rippled through the room, and Elias felt his jaw tighten. He'd been warned about this, but facing their ridicule in person was another matter entirely. Princess Arila, seated on a raised platform with the other council members, watched Elias carefully. Her silver eyes betrayed no emotion, but inwardly she was seething. This human was supposed to be her rival. This ordinary creature. Perhaps we should hear from the human himself, Arila said, her voice smooth and commanding. The laughter faded as the council turned their attention to her. Let him tell us why he believes my father, a ruler of unmatched wisdom, chose him over countless others, including me. Elias took a slow breath. He had prepared for this moment, though he still felt the weight of Arila's words. Stepping forward, he met her gaze with steady determination. With respect, Princess Arila, Elias began, his voice calm but firm. I don't claim to fully understand why King Valeth made this decision, but I do know that he saw something in humanity, something worth trusting. Humans may be young compared to many of you, but we're not without value. We adapt, we learn, and we find strength in unity. The chamber remained silent for a moment before Lady Shalara of the Seraphim Ascendancy spoke, her tone dripping with skepticism. Unity, adaptability. These are vague ideals. Commander, do you have any real experience leading more than a single ship? Elias met her gaze. I've led missions that required cooperation between species. I've negotiated with allies and enemies alike to ensure survival. Leadership isn't about power or advanced technology. It's about understanding people and finding solutions no matter the odds. Representative Zornak let out a sharp hiss. Bold words, human. But words are meaningless without proof. Chancellor Xoreth raised a clawed hand, silencing the murmurs that followed. That is why the council has decided to test Commander Voss. Elias frowned slightly. Test me? How? The Chancellor gestured to Arila, who rose gracefully from her seat. Her presence commanded attention, and her voice was calm, but edged with steel. The Galactic Games, she said. a series of trials designed to test combat, strategy, and leadership. They are the traditional way to determine a ruler's worth. If you succeed, the council will honor my father's will. But if you fail, the empire will fall to its rightful heir. Elias studied her carefully. She was clever, clearly trying to paint herself as the better choice without openly defying her father's will. Still, her challenge felt like an opportunity, a way to prove himself not just to the council, but to humanity as well. "I accept the challenge," Elias said, his voice unwavering. The chamber erupted into a mix of cheers, jeers, and murmurs. The council's reactions were split, with some eager to see the human fail and others intrigued by his confidence. As the commotion died down, Arila's lips curved into a small, cold smile. "Then prepare yourself, Commander. The games will begin in 3 cycles. I suggest you use the time wisely." Elias inclined his head, acknowledging her warning. He knew the odds were against him, but he also knew he couldn't back down. For humanity, for the legacy of King Valeth, and for himself, he would fight. As Elias left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. But he also felt something else, a spark of determination. The Galactic Council might mock him now, but he would show them what humanity was capable of. And perhaps, by the end of it all, even Princess Arila would understand why her father had chosen him. 3 cycles later, the Galactic Council chamber was abuzz with activity as representatives and spectators from across the galaxy gathered to witness the opening of the Galactic Games. The games were not mere entertainment. They were a time-honored tradition, a series of trials designed to test the mettle of leaders and warriors alike. To many in the chamber, the games were more than a contest. They were a public stage to humiliate the human who dared to stand among them. Elias Voss stood at the edge of the arena, the towering structure a marvel of alien architecture. The field below shimmered with shifting terrain, a holographic jungle one moment, a desert the next, each simulation more treacherous than the last. He adjusted the sleek combat suit provided to him, its advanced design far beyond anything humanity had developed on its own. Beside him stood Lieutenant Amina Rahal, her steady gaze filled with determination. "Sir, you've studied every challenge the games have thrown at competitors in the past. You're ready for this." Elias gave her a faint smile. "Studying and surviving are 2 different things, Amina. But thanks for the confidence boost." A low chime echoed across the arena, signaling the arrival of Princess Arila. She entered the field with the grace of someone who belonged there, her silver gown replaced by sleek, shimmering armor that accentuated her commanding presence. The crowd erupted into applause as she raised a hand in acknowledgement. Elias couldn't help but feel the stark contrast between them. Arila looked like a leader, regal, confident, and poised. He, on the other hand, was still struggling to shake off the weight of the council's judgment. As the first trial was announced, the arena's terrain shifted into a vast, dense jungle filled with towering alien flora and the echoes of unseen predators. The challenge was simple: navigate the jungle, locate a beacon hidden at its heart, and bring it back to the starting point. Arila smirked as she glanced at Elias. "Try to keep up, Commander. I wouldn't want you to get lost on your first day." Elias gave her a nod, refusing to rise to the bait. He focused on the task ahead, his mind racing through potential strategies. The jungle's holographic display might be artificial, but the dangers it presented were all too real. The chimes sounded again, and the competitors dashed into the jungle. Arila moved like a shadow, her enhanced agility and sharp instincts allowing her to navigate the dense foliage with ease. Elias, on the other hand, relied on his training and his ability to adapt. As he pushed through the thick underbrush, he activated the scanner embedded in his suit. It highlighted potential dangers, hidden pitfalls, aggressive creatures, and shifting paths designed to mislead. His progress was slower than Arila's, but it was deliberate and calculated. Hours passed, and Elias began to notice something strange. The jungle's layout wasn't random. It was designed to exploit arrogance and impatience, leading competitors into traps if they moved too quickly. He adjusted his pace, carefully studying his surroundings and marking key landmarks. Meanwhile, Arela, confident in her superior abilities, pressed forward without hesitation. She reached a clearing where the beacon was supposed to be, only to find herself surrounded by holographic predators, sleek, alien creatures with glowing eyes and razor-sharp fangs. Her armor's eye warned her of the imminent attack, and she prepared to fight. Though she was a skilled warrior, the swarm of creatures overwhelmed her, forcing her to retreat. Elias, following a more cautious route, heard the distant sound of battle and realized Arela was in trouble. Against his better judgment, he altered his course to find her. When he reached the clearing, he saw Arela fending off the predators, her movements precise but desperate. Without hesitation, Elias activated the combat module in his suit and charged in. Using a combination of strategy and improvisation, he drew the creature's attention away from Arela, giving her a chance to recover. Together, they fought off the swarm, their movements gradually sensing as they worked in tandem. When the last predator fell, Arela turned to Elias, her expression a mix of frustration and reluctant gratitude. "You didn't have to help me," she said, her voice edged with disbelief. Elias shrugged. "We're competitors, not enemies. And besides, I couldn't just leave you to face that alone." Arela stared at him for a moment before nodding curtly. "Let's not make a habit of this." The beacon, now unguarded, glowed softly in the clearing. Elias gestured toward it. "You can take it. I'm more interested in finishing the challenge than making a point." Arela hesitated, then grabbed the beacon and ran toward the starting point. As Elias followed, he couldn't help but notice the flicker of doubt in her usually confident demeanor. By the time they returned to the arena, the crowd was stunned into silence. While Arela had officially claimed victory in the first trial, Elias had earned something far more valuable: the respect of those who had doubted him. The Galactic Council watched with growing interest. The human, it seemed, was full of surprises. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with whispers and muted discussions following the conclusion of the first trial. Although Princess Arela had claimed victory, the Council could not ignore the unexpected twist. The human, Commander Elias Voss, had saved the princess from what could have been a humiliating failure. For the first time, some council members began to question their assumptions. Could this human truly be a capable leader? Elias, however, had little time to dwell on the council's shifting perceptions. After the trial, he returned to the preparation chambers, his body sore and his mind racing. The holographic jungle had been more challenging than he'd anticipated, and he knew the trials ahead would only grow more difficult. As he sat on a bench, inspecting his suit for damage, the sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. He looked up to see Princess Arela standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Commander Voss," she began, her tone formal. "May I have a word?" Elias nodded, gesturing for her to enter. "Of course, Princess. What can I do for you?" Arela stepped into the room, her silver armor gleaming under the chamber's artificial light. She crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "I came to thank you for your assistance during the trial." Elias raised an eyebrow, surprised by the gesture. "You're welcome. I wasn't about to leave you behind." Arela frowned slightly, as if his answer only deepened her confusion. "Why? We're competitors. Helping me put you at a disadvantage." Elias leaned back against the wall, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe. But I don't see this as a competition between us. These trials are about proving who's capable of leadership, and leaders don't abandon people in need, even if it's inconvenient." For a moment, Arela said nothing, her silver eyes studying him carefully. Finally, she sighed. "You speak like my father did. He believed in unity, in working together for a greater purpose. But the galaxy isn't so simple, Commander. Trust is a rare commodity, and alliances are often fragile." Elias smiled faintly. "Sounds like you've had more than your share of disappointments." Arela's expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her usual composure. My father placed his trust in me, trained me to lead. But in the end, he chose you. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Elias hesitated, then nodded. I do. I've been underestimated my entire career. Even now, most of the council sees me as a joke. But I didn't come here to prove them wrong. I came because someone believed in me, and I won't let him down. Arilla's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she straightened, her professional demeanor returning. The next trial is tomorrow. It will test strategy and cooperation. I suggest we form a temporary alliance. Elias blinked in surprise. An alliance? You're serious? I am. Arilla said firmly. You've proven you're capable, and I'd rather not risk another setback. We work together for this trial, and once it's over, we go back to being rivals. Elias considered her offer. Trusting Arilla was a gamble, but he couldn't deny that her skills and knowledge would be invaluable. All right, he said finally. Alliance it is, for this trial. Arilla nodded, satisfied. Good. I'll meet you at the starting point tomorrow. With that, she turned and left the chamber, her silver armor catching the light as she disappeared down the corridor. The following day, the arena transformed once more, its terrain shifting into a vast, simulated battlefield. The second trial required competitors to work in teams, coordinating their efforts to achieve a common goal, securing and holding a series of strategic points scattered across the field. Elias and Arilla stood side by side as the trial began, their temporary partnership drawing curious glances from the other competitors. The council watched with interest, their skepticism tempered by growing curiosity. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the unlikely duo was a force to be reckoned with. Arilla's tactical brilliance and Elias's adaptability created a seamless partnership. They anticipated each other's moves, countered the strategies of their opponents, and secured key objectives with precision. At one point, Arilla found herself pinned down by an opposing team, their advanced weaponry overwhelming her defenses. Elias, spotting the danger, devised a quick plan. Using the terrain to his advantage, he created a diversion that allowed Arilla to regroup and counterattack. Not bad, Commander, Arilla said as they pressed forward, a hint of respect in her tone. Same to you, Princess, Elias replied with a grin. By the end of the trial, they had not only secured victory, but had done so in a way that left the council speechless. Their performance was a testament to the power of cooperation, even between rivals. As they exited the arena, the cheers of the crowd ringing in their ears, Arilla turned to Elias. This changes nothing, she said, though her tone lacked its usual edge. I wouldn't expect it to, Elias replied. But admit it, you're starting to see why your father trusted me. Arilla didn't respond, but the faintest smile played at the corners of her lips as she walked away. For the first time, Elias felt a glimmer of hope. The council might mock him, and the trials might grow more dangerous, but he was proving, one step at a time, that humanity had a place among the stars. The Galactic Games were well into their final trials, and the tension in the air was palpable. Elias Voss, despite his unexpected success, could feel the weight of every eye in the council room. His every move was scrutinized, and the pressure was immense. But what he didn't know was that the hardest test was yet to come. After the success in the cooperation trial, where he and Princess Arilla had worked together seamlessly, the council's opinion of him had shifted. Though many still doubted humanity's potential, some had begun to see Elias not as a symbol of weakness, but as a representative of something they hadn't expected, strength through unity and adaptability. Elias and Arilla stood side by side once more, awaiting the announcement for the next challenge. Unlike the previous trials, which were clearly structured, the next one was shrouded in mystery. The third trial will begin shortly. A voice boomed across the arena, echoing in the vast chamber. This time, you will not be alone in facing your opponents. There will be unforeseen challenges. Your strength will be tested, not just your physical abilities, but your leadership, your intelligence, and your moral compass. Elias exchanged a quick glance with Arela, who stood silently beside him. The uncertainty in her eyes mirrored his own. They had already proven their tactical prowess and teamwork in the earlier trials, but now it seemed that something deeper would be required. The arena suddenly shifted, the floor beneath them rumbling as the landscape changed. They found themselves on a barren planet, the sky above a blood-red hue, with jagged mountains rising on all sides. A cold wind swept through the landscape, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and dangerous. The ground was uneven, the rocky terrain treacherous. "What's the objective here?" Elias muttered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Before Arela could respond, the ground in front of them cracked open, revealing massive chasms that seemed to go on forever. Out of the darkness, enormous creatures, partially mechanical, partially organic, began to emerge. Their eyes glowed like molten lava, and their growls reverberated in the air. "Looks like we're not alone," Arela said, her voice steady but tense. Elias nodded. "These things are bigger than anything we faced before. We need to take them down, or we'll never make it through." As the creatures advanced, Elias and Arela quickly strategized. The trial had shifted from a test of pure skill to one of resourcefulness and leadership. They had to rely on each other to survive the onslaught of monstrous foes. "Move," Arela commanded, immediately taking the lead as she dashed toward the first creature, drawing her weapon. Elias followed closely, using his suit's advanced technology to fire at the approaching beasts. The creatures attacked with vicious force, their massive claws tearing through the rocky surface. Arela dodged one strike and swiftly countered, landing a critical blow to the creature's side. Elias was not far behind, using a well-placed shot to bring down another. But they were outnumbered, and the battle was far from over. Elias's mind raced. He realized that brute force wouldn't be enough. The creatures were resilient, and they seemed to multiply with every passing minute. "We need to create a diversion," he shouted to Arela. "Something to split their focus." Without hesitation, Arela nodded. "I'll draw their attention. You take the high ground and hit them from above." Elias found a vantage point on a nearby cliff, his heart pounding as he set up his shot. Below, Arela was luring the creatures toward her, her agility keeping her one step ahead as she danced between strikes. She moved like a comet in the night sky, a blur of silver and grace. Elias steadied his breath and fired. The blast hit the ground near the creatures, causing a large explosion that sent them scattering. He continued to fire, picking off the largest of the beasts as they tried to regroup. For what felt like hours, they fought side by side, each providing cover for the other. With every strike, Elias found himself growing more and more connected to the princess, not as a competitor, but as an ally. The final creature, a massive hybrid with armored plating, was the last to fall. As it crashed to the ground with a deafening roar, Elias and Arela stood victorious, but exhausted. For a moment, the arena fell silent. The ground beneath them trembled, and the harsh wind died down. The creatures that had once seemed unstoppable were now motionless, their bodies vanishing into the red dust. A voice echoed across the arena. "The trial is over. You have passed." Elias exhaled a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his brow. His body ached, and his mind felt hazy. But they had made it. Together, they had overcome the trial, and they had done it without compromising their integrity. As they stood there, the council's approval seemed to hang in the air, tangible. Some were still skeptical, but even they could not deny that humanity had proven itself capable of much more than they had first believed. Arela turned to Elias, her face still as stoic as ever. "That was unexpected," she said, her voice softer than usual. Elias gave a tired smile. "It's never easy. But we did it." Arela's expression flickered briefly, almost imperceptibly, and then returned to her usual cold composure. "I still don't fully understand why my father chose you over me, but you've earned my respect." Elias nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "I'm just doing what's right." As the last of the creatures dissolved into the arena's energy fields, the real test for Elias was just beginning. The council had seen his ability to survive, but the final trial was more than a test of strength. It would be a test of character. Would Elias be the leader humanity needed, or would the weight of this empire, inherited from a king whose name still echoed through the stars, crush him? The answer would come soon enough. The Galactic Games were nearing their end, and the atmosphere in the council chamber had shifted once again. After every trial, the council's view of Commander Elias Voss had evolved, from mockery to curiosity to grudging respect. However, as the final trial loomed, they were more uncertain than ever. Would the human leader live up to the legacy his father had left behind, or would he prove to be a failure, not worthy of the title? Elias had already faced unimaginable challenges, from the unforgiving jungle to the monstrous creatures of the barren planet. Yet, the final trial was different. The voice in the arena had promised a test of character, leadership, and moral resolve, and Elias wasn't sure what that would look like. He stood in front of the grand entrance to the arena, his heart racing. Arela stood beside him, her usual calm demeanor masking a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. This trial would be their last chance to prove themselves, and the stakes were higher than ever. "I still don't understand what this trial is," Arela said quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon. Elias clenched his fists, fighting back the urge to let doubt creep in. "We'll find out soon enough." As they stepped into the arena, the familiar hum of energy fields filled the air, and the landscape transformed before their eyes. Gone were the forests, the deserts, and the beasts. Now, the arena was an intricate labyrinth, filled with narrow corridors, towering walls, and shifting passages. It was both beautiful and terrifying, an arena designed to disorient and confuse. A booming voice echoed through the maze. "This is the final trial. You must find the heart of the labyrinth and retrieve the relic hidden within. But beware, the labyrinth has its own mind, and the paths are never what they seem. Only the worthy can succeed." The gates shut behind them with a loud clang, sealing them inside. "The relic," Elias muttered. "Sounds simple enough, but I don't think it's going to be that easy." Arela nodded, her eyes narrowing. "It never is." They began to walk through the maze, each step cautious. The walls around them shifted and groaned, and the paths seemed to change with every turn they took. One moment, they'd be facing a dead end, and the next, the walls would rearrange, offering a new path. The labyrinth itself felt alive, like it was trying to keep them inside forever. For hours, they moved through the maze. Their progress was slow, but steady. They spoke little, their focus fixed on finding the elusive relic that would mark their victory. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this trial was testing them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Each time they reached a crossroads, they found themselves questioning their choices. Was it better to take the riskier path, or to stay on the safer one? Every decision felt monumental, as if the labyrinth was pushing them to make mistakes. "I think we're being watched," Elias said suddenly, breaking the silence. Arela stopped and listened carefully. "You're right. Something's not right here." Before they could react, a strange noise echoed through the maze. The ground beneath their feet rumbled, and a massive wall of stone rose from the ground, cutting off their path. "Trapped," Arela whispered. Elias's mind raced. There had to be a way out, but the labyrinth had become more than just an obstacle. It was testing their decision-making, their patience, and their ability to stay calm under pressure. "Do you trust me?" Elias asked, looking at Arela. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I do." "Why?" Elias pointed to a small crack in the stone wall. "I think I can get through there. If I can, I'll find a way to deactivate the trap." Without waiting for a response, he moved quickly toward the crack. The stone walls around him seemed to pulse with energy, and the air grew thick with tension. He reached the crack and began to carefully examine it, looking for any sign of weakness. Meanwhile, Arela kept watch, her weapon ready in case anything unexpected happened. She trusted Elias's judgment, but the longer they stayed in the maze, the more she felt the pressure building. The labyrinth was playing on their nerves, testing not only their strength and agility, but their ability to think clearly under duress. Just as Elias found a way to pry the stone apart, a voice echoed through the maze, this time different from the one before. It was calm and commanding, filled with authority. Only those who lead with integrity and selflessness are worthy to claim the relic. Do you possess these qualities, Commander Voss? Or do you seek personal glory? Elias froze. The voice seemed to know him, to know his deepest fears. He felt a weight settle in his chest as the labyrinth's true nature became clear. It wasn't just a test of physical ability, but of his soul. The voice continued. What would you do to succeed? Would you sacrifice others to gain the relic, or would you work for the good of all? Elias's mind raced as he grappled with the question. The labyrinth wasn't just watching his movements, it was watching his choices. The relic wasn't just a prize, it was a reflection of who he was, of what he stood for. I will not sacrifice anyone, Elias said firmly. I've made it this far by working together with others. That's the only way forward. The labyrinth seemed to pause, as if considering his words. Then, with a deep rumble, the stone wall slowly lowered, revealing the path ahead. The voice spoke again, this time with a note of approval. You have chosen wisely. Continue. Elias turned to Arela, who had been watching in stunned silence. It seems the trial is more about our choices than we realized. She nodded slowly. It's testing us, not just as warriors, but as leaders. Together, they moved forward, their path now clearer, the relic within reach. But Elias knew the final test had only just begun. They were being judged, not just by the labyrinth, but by the entire galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. Elias and Arela stood at the edge of the final chamber. The labyrinth had shifted once again, and now they faced the last and most daunting obstacle. The air in the chamber felt heavier, as though the weight of the entire galaxy was pressing down on them. The relic, a shining crystal that pulsed with an otherworldly light, was displayed at the center of the room. It was surrounded by an ethereal glow, rising from a pedestal that seemed to float above the floor. The relic was beautiful, but it was not the only thing in the chamber. At the far side of the room stood an ancient figure, tall, regal, and clad in robes of shimmering gold. His face was hidden in shadow, but there was no mistaking the presence he exuded. Elias could feel the weight of his gaze, even though the figure never moved. This is the final test. The figure's voice rang out, calm and unyielding. The relic you seek is not just a symbol of power. It is a test of your character, your ability to lead, and the choices you will make for the future of your people. Elias stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the galaxy upon him. He had come so far, faced countless trials, and yet he knew this moment was different. This was not a test of strength, nor of tactics. This was a test of heart. Do you seek the relic for yourself? The figure continued, his voice unwavering. Do you seek to claim it for glory, or will you put the needs of others before your own desires? Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He had learned much on this journey, and he knew the answer. He wasn't here for glory, and he wasn't here for himself. He was here because his people needed someone who could lead with honor, someone who would do what was right, not what was easy. I do not seek this relic for myself, Elias said, his voice steady and resolute. I seek it for humanity, for the future we can build together. If I am to lead, it must be for the good of all, not for personal gain. The figure stood silent for a long moment, the tension in the room almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke again. Your words are true, the figure said, his voice softening. But it is not enough to simply say the right thing. The relic will only be given to those who prove their worth through their actions. At that moment, the relic began to glow brighter, its light growing more intense. Elias felt a surge of energy course through him, and he instinctively stepped forward, drawn to the object. But as he reached out to touch it, a sharp voice stopped him. "Stop," Arila called, stepping forward to block his path. "You can't take it alone." Elias turned to face her, confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "This is the final trial. I have to take the relic to prove my worth." Ariela's expression was serious. "This trial is about leadership. The relic is not meant for just one person. It's meant to be shared. If you take it alone, you will have failed. Leadership is about unity, about working together. You cannot lead if you are not willing to share the burden with others." Elias stood there, stunned. The weight of her words sank in, and for the first time, he understood. This trial wasn't just about him proving himself. It was about proving his ability to lead others, to lift them up, and to share the responsibility that came with power. "You're right," Elias said quietly. "I can't do this alone." Together, they both reached for the relic, their hands meeting as they touched the glowing crystal. The chamber erupted in light, and the ancient figure stepped forward, nodding in approval. "You have proven yourselves worthy," the figure said. "True leadership is not about taking power. It is about sharing it, about lifting others up and working together for the greater good. You have passed the final trial, and with it, you have earned the right to lead." The relic, now glowing with a soft, steady light, shifted and became an intricate key. The figure extended his hand and passed the key to Elias, who took it with reverence. "You now hold the key to a new future," the figure said. "The galaxy is waiting for leaders who will unite its people, not divide them. Take this key, and may you lead with wisdom, compassion, and strength." The chamber began to fade, and Elias and Arila were transported back to the council chamber, where the Galactic Council stood waiting. Their expressions were unreadable, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. As Elias stepped forward, the key still in his hand, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The trials had tested him in ways he never expected, but they had also shown him the true nature of leadership. It wasn't about winning for personal glory. It was about doing what was right, about putting the needs of others above his own. The council members watched silently as Elias approached the center of the room. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see if he would live up to the legacy of the king. But Elias knew, deep down, that he was ready. He had earned his place not through strength or cunning, but through the choices he had made. "I stand here not as a conqueror," Elias said, his voice clear and unwavering. "I stand here as a leader, one who understands that true strength comes from unity, from working together, and from making decisions that serve the greater good. I will lead humanity with honor, and I will help guide the galaxy into a new era of peace and cooperation." The council fell silent, and for the first time, there was no mockery, no doubt, just respect. Elias Voss, the human who had defied the odds and earned the trust of the galaxy, had proven that humanity had a place among the stars. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Elias had earned the right to lead.